The UK just hit another breaking point. Over 58,000 Eastern European workers vanished from critical sectors in this last year alone. That's enough to staff every NHS hospital in London. But here's what no one's admitting. 1 in 3 UK farms can't harvest food without them, and an average construction project is delayed by 200 days. And in hospitals, 15,000 vacant shifts remain unfilled monthly because British workers won't take these jobs, even at £15 an hour. This isn't just about labour shortage anymore, it's a ticking time bomb. So why is the government still pretending they're replaceable? Stick around as we uncover how this exodus will forever change the UK as we know it, and the shocking reason Brexit made it worse than anyone predicted. The UK's Eastern European exodus has reached a critical tipping point, as over 90,000 fewer Polish, Romanian and Bulgarian workers are still in Britain today, compared to what it was in 2019. But here's the brutal reality no one wants to admit. The UK didn't just rely on these workers, they desperately needed them. For years, politicians called them cheap labour, while many sectors of the economy quietly depended on their skills, sweat and willingness to do jobs Brits refused. Now, as shortages reach crisis levels, the UK is facing the consequences of taking these workers for granted. But first, let's go back to 2004 when the EU expanded eastward and Britain opened its doors to Eastern Europe. This wasn't just any migration, it became a lifeline. By 2016, over 1.2 million Poles alone called the UK their home, which was more than the entire population of Birmingham. They didn't intend to steal jobs, they simply filled critical gaps in industries where British workers were visibly absent. Take agriculture, for instance. In 2019, a staggering 80% of seasonal farm workers came from other European countries. Fast forward to 2025, and the consequences of losing them are painfully clear by the day. Farms in Kent are offering £25 per hour for fruit pickers and still watching crops rot in the fields. The result? The UK now imports about 12% of its fruit from Spain. Construction, an important part of any developed society, relies heavily on foreign workers. Before Brexit, Romanian engineers built 1 in 3 London skyscrapers, while Polish tradespeople kept infrastructure projects moving. Now, with visas harder to obtain, projects like HS2 are over 300 days behind schedule. Then there's the NHS, the most visible casualty of this workforce drain. In recent years, Romanian health workers formed part of the 5% of EU nationals who were nurses in the UK. Post-Brexit immigration rules have made replacing them nearly impossible, which in turn forces hospitals to recruit from as far as India at triple the cost. Even the hospitality sector, which is often dismissed as unskilled work, has been gutted. Before the exodus, about 62% of London's bartenders and hotel staff were from Eastern Europe, working the nights, weekends and holidays that British workers routinely turned down. Now, the help-wanted signs outnumber customers in most tourist hotspots, with prices going up even as businesses struggle to adapt. One of Britain's fatal miscalculations was assuming Brits would step up to fill these roles. The uncomfortable truth is that the UK didn't just lose workers, it lost the backbone of its economy. And as we'll soon see, this labour crisis is now accelerating the UK's slide into more recession, with Westminster quietly and desperately reaching out to Brussels for solutions they're unlikely to get. The question isn't whether the UK can survive without Eastern European workers, it's whether it can survive what happens next. Let's find out. Brexit aimed to give the UK more control over its borders, but it led to unexpected issues. British workers didn't replace the Eastern European migrants as hoped. By the latter part of 2020, fewer Europeans were arriving in the UK to work, and many of those who had been living in the country were leaving. What was the immediate result of this action? Labour shortages. In just a matter of months after Brexit was finalised, businesses across the UK found it increasingly challenging to fill low-wage, labour-intensive jobs. Those engaged in agriculture as an occupation were also beginning to suffer, since they could no longer access any staff. The UK government had anticipated that local workers would simply fill the gaps left by Eastern Europeans, but this did not come to pass as expected. In fact, by 2021, the number of Bulgarians and Romanians alone in the UK had dropped significantly. Around 79,000 Bulgarians were reportedly in the UK in 2021, a sharp decrease from 121,000 back in 2019. What caused this sudden exodus? Well, as soon as the UK left the EU, the free movement of EU workers was no more effective in Britain, and with it, so did the guaranteed rights for Eastern European migrants to legally work in the UK. As a result, the UK lost a significant portion of its migrant workforce, and many Eastern European workers were no longer able to work in the UK without a visa or work permit. To this effect, the UK government introduced a number of temporary measures, such as Seasonal Agricultural Workers Scheme, which offered a limited number of visas to help with labour shortages. However, these efforts did not quite materialise, and they were insufficient to satisfy the demand for workers. Farmers in the UK needed as many 80,000 workers, but the government provided about 30,000 temporary visas to foreign workers. This made the lack of supply and demand so evident, and the short-sightedness of the government more evident with each passing month. This was the unforeseen consequence of Brexit. As much as the UK could not gain control, it was also losing the same employees it so desperately required. The bitter truth of Brexit was finally settling in, and the illusion of a Britain independent of the EU's influence was quickly becoming one. What followed? How did the UK handle the crisis of Eastern European migrants leaving? Let's look at how a scheme like Trump's MAGA drove them away.
This is not a programme for 1 year or one parliament. It is a blueprint for the future of Britain.
In response to the labour shortages that followed Brexit, the UK government rolled out a campaign known as Pick for Britain in 2020. The idea was simple: recruit more British workers to fill the seasonal vacancies left by immigrants who were set to leave the country, especially Eastern Europeans in the agriculture sector. The government was very confident that with enough publicity and promotion, more British citizens would step up to fill these vital roles. As the months passed, it became clear that the initiative was dead on arrival. The government hopes that British citizens would take on the roles once filled by migrants from Eastern Europe, who had been essential to the UK's agricultural workforce for years. In reality, only a tiny percentage of the advertised 70,000 seasonal agricultural roles were taken by the indigenous British workforce. This was a far more underwhelming turnout when you consider the massive scale of labour shortages the UK now faced, with many UK farmers who had hoped the campaign would deliver the workers needed for harvests left with a serious gap in manpower. Why didn't British citizens take these jobs? It is partly because harvesting crops is tough, tiring, and often means long hours in the sun. Many Britons simply didn't and still do not find these kinds of jobs appealing, as they view them as not providing the level of income or long-term job security that many workers are looking for. In addition, the pay offered for these types of jobs is generally considered to be lower than what people would make in other sectors, such as retail or administrative work. This situation also led to fewer sign-ups from the local population across different UK cities. The Pick for Britain campaign not only failed to meet its set goal, but also revealed a hard truth. The UK's dependence on Eastern European workers was far greater than many realised. The reliance on migrant labour in agriculture had also become so mixed in the system that expecting British workers to simply replace them was unrealistic. The failure of this scheme exposed the gap between the political rhetoric and economic reality in the UK. The government had promised that Brexit would free the country from its over-reliance on foreign workers and that the British would fill the gap. However, since it did not turn out as planned, Britain was hit hard by a number of economic consequences. The labour shortages in the agricultural sector caused by Brexit and the lack of workers from other European nations quickly spread beyond farming. The UK felt the domino effect in a number of industries that were already struggling with their workforce challenges, such as healthcare, manufacturing, construction, hospitality and retail. In healthcare, for instance, the UK faced an immediate shortage of doctors, nurses and primary caregivers. The UK National Health Service had long relied on workers from countries like Romania and Poland, among other countries around the world, to fill vacancies that locals couldn't fill. However, with fewer individuals from Eastern Europe applying to work in the UK due to Brexit and the end of EU free movement, the NHS also underwent a slight struggle with staffing. By 2021, European nationals made up over 5% of the NHS total workforce, and most of that consisted of Eastern Europeans. Without this surge in labour, the UK's healthcare system was on the direction of being critically stressed, especially given the post-COVID-19 pandemic situation. Similarly, in the tourism sector, there was no difference because hotels, restaurants and pubs started struggling to recruit enough personnel to meet the demands of tourists and locals. Workers from Poland, Lithuania and other Eastern European countries have been crucial to the success of the hospitality sector. However, when they departed from the UK after Brexit, most businesses experienced closures or were forced to reduce the hours that they were operating. The retail sector was also badly hit. With fewer workers, stores soon became short-staffed even as supply chains were disrupted. Already struck by the COVID-19 pandemic, the retail sector has found it challenging to meet consumer demand. As a result, it took more time to deliver simple parcels and shelves were left empty as most businesses scrambled to hire new staff at higher wages. One of the largest impacts of the shortages was their lasting economic influence on the UK. With ever more companies being unable to maximise output, the UK's growth in GDP began to fall. The economic pressures caused by the shortages of labour, combined with the political pressures existing at the time, also raised the cost burden on the population across the country. The UK's workers' shortage wasn't just inconvenient, it threatened economic recovery after Brexit and revealed the economy's reliance on Eastern Europeans. The government tried short-term visas to attract local workers, but the country was clearly in serious trouble. The UK's reliance on Eastern European workers had been a key factor in keeping its economy afloat. The question remained, what would really be the consequences of not having Britain navigate these challenges as it moves forward? The United Kingdom has a deep-seated challenge that it can no longer ignore. This issue isn't just about filling gaps in various sectors of its economy, it touches on the broader cultural and economic fabric of the country. The UK's ageing population is a key issue. In 2016, over 11% of people were aged 65 or over, and this number might increase to over 18% by 2041. This shift means that there will be fewer young Britons to fill the gap left by retiring workers. With such dilemmas, three general alternatives are before UK industries: raise wages, mechanise the current jobs, or become less competitive. Raising wages would seem to be the easy way out. It will, however, be followed by issues of its own because higher wages often lead to inflation, where businesses pass on the higher cost to the consumer. In addition to this, the increase in pay does not mean that British workers will suddenly flood the vacant positions. Several industries still face the issue of not being able to hire staff despite increased pay. The second option of total automation of the system has been on the table in recent years. The advent of advanced robotics and artificial intelligence can address human resources shortages in fields like manufacturing and logistics. Nonetheless, the process of automation has been more sluggish than anticipated, and it has astronomical upfront investment costs. Moreover, automation may not be applied to every industry. While technology can help pick fruit on farmland, it will not easily be applicable to the human touch that is needed in hospitality or healthcare. In addition, the shift toward automation raises its own set of challenges, such as job displacement and the need for reskilling. The third option, losing competitiveness for the UK, may be the most dangerous. This means that UK industries would be unable to find workers and would then scale back on local manufacturing, ship jobs to foreign countries, or simply close down many establishments. British policymakers might take steps like changing immigration rules, reforming labour, or giving incentives for certain jobs. However, these actions may not fix the deeper Brexit-related problems with worker mobility. A rapidly ageing population, mixed with a lack of local workers to fill essential roles, means that the UK must look outward to find lasting solutions in order to avoid a slow economic decline. With Eastern European workers leaving, the UK's immigration system now carries much of the burden. Brexit has greatly changed how the government handles immigration. The Take Back Control promise has come in the form of a fresh, points-based system of immigration that excludes free movement for EU citizens and now favours skilled workers even more. This points-based immigration system, introduced in January 2021, was intended to make it more strict than before for low-skilled workers to enter the UK. It was also part of the government's general strategy of weeding the nation off too many illegal foreign workers. Migrants under the new system had to earn a certain number of points based on their skill level, salary, and proficiency in the English language. While this system was intended to attract more high-skilled labour, it had the perverse consequence of affecting a number of industries that rely on low-skilled labour. The system's focus on high-skilled workers has created a mismatch between the jobs available and the type of workers the UK needs at the moment. For example, agriculture requires workers to pick fruit and vegetables, while hospitality needs employees for restaurant service and hotel cleaning. These physically demanding jobs and the long hours required to complete them are not typically sought after by well-qualified employees, as they are less likely to be interested in this kind of work. To address the crisis, experts are calling for the introduction of a more advanced immigration system that will enable selective recruitment into sectors. The government can give visas to foreign workers for agriculture and medical needs, but it hasn't done this widely yet, leaving many businesses short-staffed. In addition to immigration reform, the use of AI and other artificial technologies can also become a long-term solution to the labour shortage. The alternatives, though, have their disadvantages, such as the potential loss of jobs and the investment of huge amounts of money in infrastructure. The UK immigration crisis has broader implications for more general labour market reform. For instance, a rise in wages for low-skilled labour would make such labour more attractive to British nationals to some degree. This could raise business costs, leading to higher prices and worsening inflation. Retraining British workers and improving skills could help, but it will take time and resources. The points-based system has flaws, and without broader solutions, the UK may struggle to stay strong with fewer Eastern European workers. The country's success in solving these challenges will determine whether it can rebuild its workforce and indeed survive without workers from faraway Eastern Europe. Can the UK truly survive without this critical workforce? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video, like, share and subscribe to this channel. You can also hit the notification bell so you never miss out on future content. Before you go, watch the other videos on your screen.